Anybody wants?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September 6th meeting of the Citizen Oversight Board. We've got a great agenda today. Meeting with Executive Director of Safety, Armando Saldate. We've got some questions that we provided to him in advance. I will call the meeting to order and move to or ask folks to approve the August 16th minutes. If folks had a chance to look at them.
So moved.
Great.
Second.
Great. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I was not in attendance, so I'm abstaining.
Okay, great. And let's make sure you were trying to attend, we understand, but stuck in a black hole of a Zoom somewhere. So apologies about that. Okay, a couple of announcements. There is still one vacancy on the COB that the mayor's office is working to fill. And so, please encourage folks to apply. The mayor's office is also working to fill the Office of Neighborhood Safety Board. And so I suspect some of the good candidates for the COB might be getting stolen over there. But either way, we are enthusiastic to fill ourselves out. And then for board members, please hold the date of late afternoon of October 4th. We are planning to host an event celebrating 20 years since the COB and OIM were established. And I just learned this morning also some improvements to the shoot board were made at that time. So an important year in the oversight of safety in the city. We have extended invites to a number of folks who have been involved in this ecosystem over the years. And I know at least one previous monitor plans to attend. So I think it'll be a really neat opportunity to do some learning and really reflect over the progress and changes made over time, and also some of the progress that we are still fighting for as a board. So change is sometimes very hard. Okay, with that, we can move to, let me move to a couple of other items of board business. Strategic planning, please hold the date November 16th. And Daniel, I think we already have invites out for that, correct? Yes. Okay,
yes.
So that was, I think we have full attendance from the board, which we were struggling to get in December, and there's no point in doing strategic planning collaboratively if we can't all be there. So look forward to having folks at that meeting. Also, we are closing the application for strategic planning facilitation today, right, Daniel? Today is the day?
Correct.
So if you know anyone, have them submit their interest today. Go ahead, Alfredo.
Have we gotten any submissions yet?
We have received one. The deadline is close of business today, so I expect to receive several this afternoon.
Thanks.
What about the person who facilitated last time? Did she submit?
I have not received a submission from her, but she's aware.
She is interested for sure. I suspect based on other projects she works on, which are usually correlated with elections, she may be otherwise occupied, but we'll see. The timing is tough on that.
Thank you.
Yep. And I think that's that. So with that, welcome, Armando. As I mentioned, we provided some questions in advance. If you wouldn't mind reading the question out loud before you answer, so folks who are not aware of what the question is can understand, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and good morning, Board. Thanks for the invitation. I always look forward to sharing information with you and answering your questions. Thank you, Daniel, for getting these to me in advance. I have had an opportunity to work with subject matter experts on these to get prepared for these questions. And so I'll dive right in. Please, if I'm kind of going off my notes here. So if you all raise your hand or something, Daniel, if you can call that out for me, because I'm not. And just want to mention Emily Locke, who's our legislative Affairs and Policy Director in the Department of Safety, is on. She also works as our liaison to the board, and she's here to take notes. So if there's any follow-up for me or for the department, we can make sure we get that document. So the first question is, this past summer, Denver 911 implemented a new automated answering service for calls to their non-emergency line. How has that transition gone, and has it worked as well as you anticipated? So the transition to this, what we call the smart IVR, has gone well. It is in that we've received very few complaints or reports of technical failures by a system. So whenever you're implementing new technology, and I know, Julia, you can appreciate this, you're always worried about the technology working, how it working as it's intended. We go through testing, we go through all those things, but when it goes live, you never know. And so having few technical failures with the system and few complaints or reports of problems is a good thing. The also with that is, just learning a new system, the business process for our call takers and things. There's also, that learning curve. So that was something that we anticipated. One thing also, when you're making a call, integrated voice response, you have to teach it cues and responses to known questions or common and frequent questions. So we started with a pretty big script, and then we're working to build that and supplement it. We knew this would be an iterative process of getting the right content in there, so we're deflecting the right number of calls to the right response. So the impact on call volume is right about what we expected. We anticipated, for only having a couple of months of time with it, that about 3% of the overall non-emergency call volume is being diverted from the 911 team. With that said, we're still waiting with our technology services and meeting with them and working on other workflows that we could be implementing. And we're doing it on a weekly basis because this is new and this is what we're learning. If there's new workflows that we're seeing or there are trends we're seeing that we can accomplish with the voice response system, we're working on that. So we continue to expect it to grow, and that more calls will be diverted appropriately and away from 911 call volume, and getting the person and have a much better customer service experience for folks when they're calling the non-emergency line. In addition, and I think I should explain what our overall goal and the citywide goal for this is that one day have where we arrive at a 2-number system. So when we have emergency calls, emergency response calls, calls for a medical emergency, a fire, a crime in progress, those calls would go to 911, and all other calls would go to 311. Right now, 311 is handles, you didn't get your trash picked up, got a pothole to report, a street sign is out, something like that are things that go through 311 right now. That is not in 911's call center. So our 911 call center that falls under the Department of Safety handles the non-emergency police line and obviously 911 police dispatch, emergency medical response, fire response, and that type of call. 311 is a whole separate call center that is staffed by a team at Technology Services in the city. When we think most of our call volume and when we think we're going to have the biggest impact is when 311 starts having a call, a smart IVR and that call response system. At this point, without additional refining, residents will be able to be directed to the person they need to talk to the first time that they're called, rather than be transferred to a team of call takers and then transferred to the appropriate endpoint. We don't have a timeline when TS is going to get that smart IVR because, like with anything, it's funding. Funding is for a project like this when you're installing and putting a new application or new system citywide, from the project management to the cost of the technology to the testing, all those things cost a lot of money. And to do it right, we're trying to identify that funding now. Technology services is, but like I said earlier, our 911 team is meeting closely with them so that we can really have this and reach our ultimate goal. I think that would be the ideal system. And then one additional add-on to that and one additional system improvement we're hoping to implement is texting a call report, texting a service. Right now, we do have text to 911, but we don't have it for non-emergency. So imagine, and we see this a lot like with encampment reporting or things like that. If, right now people are able to do it on 311, but imagine we can do that and that it would then populate into a calls for service to the right person. So that is something also that we're working to have in the future as we can identify the funding, the staffing for the projects and all that. So I don't know if I've shared with you, I did, one jurisdiction is doing this in the metro, and that is Jefferson County. And me and our 911 director have gone out there, saw their demonstration, saw their data, saw kind of their technology, what it's taking to do this, and trying to learn from them. So that is something that we're hoping to learn from, and hoping that we can deliver for our Denver residents here soon and people that come and visit here and work here.
I have a few questions on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
3% seems pretty low, and obviously you've just deployed the technology. What might you expect in terms of the, future state diverted calls?
Yeah, so that was something that I asked right off the bat, right? Like that is something, because what brought this on and necessitated us trying to have some technology improvements was, I think you all recall, after during the pandemic, we had the Great Resignation that impacted 911 staffing significantly. We were almost down to a half staffing model. We've replenished our staffing, but we're still finding, with our increased call volume, close to 2 million calls a year, we are having trouble, and we want to make, obviously 911 call response times and non-emergency times. So we thought not only we will have more staffing, but we needed to implement more technology, and this was that. When we first talked about this, and this was first rolling out, we were estimating, and those were early estimates around what we expected from some of the type of calls we got. I think up to 40% could be diverted if it was operating as intended. All those calls that we were, kind of bucketing into brackets, or types of calls that we thought could be handled by that IVR, and that's what our hope is at one day.
Okay, and what's Jeffco seeing in terms of their?
I don't remember the current their actual number. I can get it to you, but it was significant. It was very significant, to where it really, as I left that meeting with our 911 director, we were not even out of the building in the parking lot. I'm asking, when can we get this and how can we do it?
Okay.
It was significant.
And then one more call, and I see Rufina, one more question, and I see Rufina has a question as well. My next question is, in talking with the 911 director, I seem to recall a problem he had identified was like, you and I get into a car accident on Colorado Boulevard, and then Rufina and Daniel and Stefan and Alfredo all drive by and call 911 and say, there's been an accident. And so you've got 4 calls related to the same incident. And also, maybe I called because my car's broken and I feel hurt. And so is this supposed to solve that problem too, or is that something else?
That is something else. So thank you for bringing that up. And that was another piece of technology we're adding to this. And that is, it's another technology application that basically can geofence calls. So just for the example you said, big accident on I-25. Well, we sometimes get 80 calls for the same accident, right?
Yeah.
And that could overwhelm the 911 system when something like that happens. What the technology that we're going to hopefully be implementing here soon is that takes place, that happens. The application that sits on top of our CAD recognizes that, it prompts an automated voice response that says, if you are calling about the accident at I-25 in Colfax, we have that. If you are injured, please stay on the line, or if you have additional information, if not, please hang up. And hopefully that will then take away a 911 call taker from taking that call.
Okay, great. Rufina, I see you have a question.
Good morning, Armando. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Hernandez. How are you?
Good. So I wanted to ask, how long ago did Jefferson make that switch?
I don't know the exact time frame. When we met with them, it was probably, maybe we're looking at it at maybe a year ago when we first met with them, or maybe last summer it might have been. When we first met it, I want to say it had been implemented for some time there, but it was still a relatively new product for them. They were still working out some bugs. I mean, we were really even looking at, what was the applications they were using, what was the storage system, was this on cloud or not? We're looking at all those things. So, but I can get that for you.
And I was wondering about that. Julia asked one of the questions that I had, which was, what are the outcomes of their experience? And if they have several years now of that, what would be some of their recommendations in terms of implementing this plan that we should know about? And I'm sure you probably asked those questions, but I would be curious about that. Do they have a report, for example, that would outline some of that for us?
Yeah, I think they will. We did ask that. They did have a presentation for us that told us that. And like we were asking, we had our technology services partners that work directly on 911 that were with us, and their engineers, and they were talking really technical terms around the type of security, type of storage, the type of backup, the type of whether, and it is a cloud-based service, who they were using as a recommended vendor, some things to ask for, some things not. Here's an example. One thing, they developed a script of that smart IVR, that script of calls and common calls. They shared that with us. They said, here's some common calls and here's some common responses that we get. So that, I mean, we didn't start off from scratch building ours. They were very helpful in sharing that learning with us, and we continue to collaborate with them. Also, I'd like to say that our 911 director is very, he is really networked across the metro, the state, and nationally with all our 911s across the country. And he was recently at a national conference where he was recognized as the director of the year by their national group. And with that network, he's continually looking for ways to improve and technologies to find that can help us with what we're trying to do. And ultimately, it's a better call experience for anyone calling 911 or the city for help.
And that was my last question, was have they also received feedback from the customer side of it in terms of the use, and what has been that experience?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. That was one of my questions too, was what's the user acceptance, right? What was their customer feedback? Did they have any hiccups? Did they have any problems with people? Some people want to talk to a live person. They don't want to talk to a machine. What was that like? They had very good acceptance. They had very good adaption from folks, particularly their texting application. They talked about that being very successful, and that the adoption and folks that were really finding it to be a good experience. I'm sure it wasn't perfect, but I think overwhelmingly they saw it to be a success, which really convinced me that we needed to go in this direction.
I'm sorry, I said that was the last one, but that prompted another question, which was, have they got accessibility mixed into this system? And how do individuals who have mobility, that is, writing, talking, how are they able to access the system?
Great, thank you. I should have mentioned that earlier. That is something that we build in, and they built in as well. So the ability to recognize foreign languages, the number of languages, I don't know the exact number. I know here in Denver, we're working with our HRCP and our language access requirements. We're working to meet all those. So really having that recognition, we have a vendor on board that helps us with that. And then also for other ADA requirements, like for those visually impaired, those that have hearing impairment, those are types of things that we are trying to build into our system, and that Jeffco had also learned and adopted into that.
Great, thank you.
Not seeing any questions anymore, Daniel. Go on to the next one. Okay, let's go. So the next question is, recently there have been significant concerns in our community about the reported presence of Tren de Aragua gang. TDA is what it's being referred to commonly in the media. Does this gang represent a unique or greater threat to Denver residents than existing gangs? How do you think our community should be thinking about this issue when they see it in the news or on social media? So first, I will acknowledge this has blown up in the media, not only here locally, nationally. This has become, I think, part of political discussions and everything. And And first of all, I want to say that we continue to investigate the presence and activity of TDA in Denver, but the issue is nowhere near as prevalent as is being portrayed on some media and social media outlets. Unfortunately, like I said, it's been politicized in some ways, and it's really been attached to Venezuelan newcomers that have come here. This is a Venezuelan-based gang, and yes, we have seen members in criminal activity here. One of those notable criminal actions that happened here was an armed robbery that occurred at a jewelry store. Those offenders were apprehended, and they sit in our jail right now in Denver. They're also being closely monitored by our Denver Sheriff Department and Denver Police Department. All their activities being closely monitored, particularly because of their gang affiliations and gang work. The DPD and I'll assure you, Denver Police has since, obviously with any criminal activity, organized criminal activity, and in particular gang activity, our Denver Police Department has a lot of specialized resources in this realm and with any criminal enterprise that they investigate. They have briefed me, the mayor, in formal briefings and continue to provide updates on briefings, as have the sheriff department. Like I said, we have these folks in our custody now, those that have committed crime that we've brought to that have been under arrest. So DPD has implemented proactive operations, both covert and overt, in high crime areas to identify and apprehend all individuals involved in criminal activity, including gangs. We continue to work with local and federal partners, and we're on and have a significant presence on pre-existing task forces specializing in criminal enterprises, narcotics, weapons violations, and human trafficking. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that's a lot of my past was that when I served in public safety, a great part of my career was working on gangs. In fact, that was my specialty, working in gangs and organized crime. I was recognized by courts as an expert in gangs, and I traveled the country working on organized gangs, street gangs, prison-based gangs, and this that. So when I get briefed on these things, I definitely have an informed lens on this. And I got to say, this isn't new. This isn't a new phenomenon that we had a new group of newcomers that came from a different area. We could point back to when MS-13 was here and first entered, when we had El Salvadorans that were coming to our country. I mean, we could go all the way dated back to the origins of our country, where organized crime has also, come. Criminal subcultures and gangs, they do evolve and they do happen. But here, and to represent them, that they've somehow taken over a city, a community, an area, or even a complex, an apartment complex, is just untrue. In fact, I've seen the media where the residents of that complex, talked about that wasn't true, and yet they were just, subject to some deplorable living conditions there. So the task forces I'm talking about and that I've also served on has DPD specialized investigation teams. They're always monitoring their things. They're working on things day and night on operations to thwart this activity. Specific threats to any apartment complexes here in Denver have not been identified. As I said, there's been no takeovers here. There's not been one, area that they've claimed or anything like that. Regardless, DPD is working with the apartment complex managers to ensure safety and for those residing in the complexes. And we're in frequent communication with them and the residents to encourage the reporting of issues and threats. One of the things is, this is really, I want to mention this, and if we have any community members, please want to message this, like, no one should ever feel any sort of concern about calling the police if they are, don't have status or legal status here in our country. That is not something that our officers will ask in responding, and everyone has the right to call for help and call to report crime and criminal activity. So please, we encourage folks to do that. That's how we're going to be able to respond and and hold criminals accountable for this. And we hold any criminal accountable for that, regardless of their immigration status. So to assist in these efforts, the community is encouraged to always suspicious activity, any sort of crime in progress, call or text 911, and you can always contact Crime Stoppers and even report things anonymously. DPD does not ask witnesses or victims of crime about their immigration status, and so there should be, hopefully there is no potential barrier to reporting. Also, we have, Spanish-speaking officers, officers that speak other languages, and we also have the ability to get language lines on the phone for any particular language that we may come across. So I please encourage folks to report that. Overall, we've seen, as I'm talking about this, we have seen a decrease in reported violent gun crime, total violent crime, property crimes, and total crime citywide. But I'm not here to say that we've solved any problems. I'm saying we're working hard and we have a lot of work to do still to reduce crime and particularly violence. And I just want to say, you know, that with all the politicization of this, all that, I would say that we're still a welcoming city, right? But we also prioritize that part of being a welcoming city is that we maintain a commitment to public safety. We want to be a safe community. So we love working with our communities that are engaging in problems, that are having any issues. Please work with us, please talk with us. In particular, like those areas that we have our place network investigations and things, we have all city resources mobilizing to help in these regards. Yesterday, we were in a briefing, the mayor on some of our safe city efforts. And when I looked around the room, it wasn't just police talking about our efforts around providing a safe city. It was folks from public health. It was folks from across the city, from Dottie, from all sorts of spectrums of the city services that are there to talk about their input and their contribution to delivering a safe city. In one condition, we're talking about an apartment complex that's in our P&I locations where we're having public health working on some of those conditions that are reported similar to what those residents in Aurora were conditioning, you know, public health conditions, you know, poor conditions of the apartment. So we're looking to hold landlords accountable, even those landlords, and a lot of times they're not even here in this community, accountable and making sure, and in some cases that means fining them. In other cases, we work with our excise and license and other sanctioning bodies to make sure that we can help have a better condition for folks to live. Are there any questions on that particular? Okay. Not seeing any. I'll go to the next question. In June, a hearing officer hired by the Civil Service Commission overturned a disciplinary order from my office related to a police shooting at Monaco Parkway back in December of 2020. Has the city appealed that decision to either the full commission or district court? If not, can you speak why? So first, let me explain just for context. So when in this particular instance, there was an officer involved shooting. That officer involved shooting resulted in cars that were in the backdrop of the shooting being struck by gunfire from the officers. No one was injured in that. There was a delay also because we were handling COVID at this time. So when a shooting it goes through the shooting review. I remember earlier in this, our chairwoman, Richmond made mention that the shoot review board, there's a shoot review board that reviews it. They review the tactics. They review, is this within policy, not in policy. After the pandemic and after some time, the independent monitor and others looked at this and we all talked about opening an investigation on it of misconduct. That investigation was opened by the Denver Police Department's Internal Affairs Bureau. We did come to, and I finally came to a disciplinary decision on that. And I found that the two officers that fired the shots in that officer involved shooting were out of policy, and we administered a discipline of that. And I believe it was suspensions. If I recall correctly, I may be wrong, but I think there were 10-day suspensions. Okay, so there was some time there that there issue. The decision that discipline decision was appealed per the officer's rights. To the first level of appeal is to the Civil Service Commission. And that, as stated in the question, they hire a hearing officer. That hearing officer hears evidence, and they, from the city and from the officer, and they rendered a decision. One of those officers, we came into a settlement agreement with, and where they were given a discipline pursuant to that settlement agreement. another officer, their discipline was overturned by that hearing officer. That's when the next process goes. We can appeal to the full commission, or if it went for us, the officer could appeal to the full commission. Then there's steps. It could then be appealed to district court, and then ultimately through the whole court process, there could be appeals process. There are decisions, and those decisions are made based off the orders and what we hear back on this. And so there is a discussion that is had with the city attorney's office, with my office, with the police department about the decision to appeal. That discussion is a deliberative process, and it's also protected by legal privilege. And so I can't share with you the details of the decision making on that. The decision was made not to appeal. But because of the deliberative process and the legal that this was it's a decision that we discuss, and it's covered by our legal process. So I can't share that with you all. There are any questions in regards to that?
Go ahead, Stefan.
Well, I understand the deliberative process. Director Saldate, obviously we are extremely disappointed with this result. This is a case that had been going on for quite some time. I think, the bottom line, we don't really know what happened with the hearing officer, but I think a lot of people were influenced by the fact that the assailants in this crime in this situation committed a heinous crime with respect to a home invasion and a murder that took place as a result. Nonetheless, we looked at it as a board in terms of what happened. When we looked at the situation as a whole, and we looked at what happened, and what clearly happened as a result of these officers was they placed the lives of the innocent people at risk by firing their weapons into traffic, hitting other vehicles. This could have been an even greater tragedy had somebody been killed who was simply driving on Monaco. And we fully supported the fact that that you and others took the position that there should be discipline with respect to these officers' conduct in putting the lives of innocent people in harm's way. And we are just disappointed, very, very disappointed on the ultimate results here, because we feel that part of our job, a huge part of our job, is making sure that law enforcement, when appropriate, is held accountable for conduct like this. And I think that's what the public looks to us for. And so when we have a result like this, where basically it ends up where there really is no accountability for something like this, which could have been a huge tragedy. I was a woman and her baby who actually, were involved at some point, where I know one of the assailant here was trying to carjack the car. So in any event, it could have been so much worse. And we feel that there should have been discipline imposed. We feel that it should have been upheld. We feel that it should have been appealed. So I just wanted to express, and I want to say, as I started with, I understand the necessity of a deliberative process, but I just simply wanted to express our disappointment in the ultimate result here, as has been expressed in a few of our letters. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I thank you, Stefan, for all of that. I would have said exactly the same thing. I think a secondary concern, primary concern is people need to behave in accordance with police policy. And when they don't, they should receive corrective action such that it doesn't happen again with those officers or other officers. And the other officers then is the question of whether this decision creates precedent. And so some of the things that we understand about why this decision was made was, it had taken a really long time to process. And don't we all know that the discipline process is elaborate and long in the city of Denver? And, many cases can take years and years to process. And so a concern for it's not timely anymore creates a whole set of havoc in terms of disciplinary processes for anything in the department. And then a secondary consideration was the decision of the shoot board initially really influenced, the decision of the Civil Service Commission. And what is the point in escalating, appeals if everyone's just going to decide the same thing based on what the person before decided? That doesn't feel like actually, sort of independent oversight. And oh, by the way, we disagreed with what the shoe board said. It was a clear violation of policy. So I guess my question to you is, do you feel like this creates a precedent for other decisions to be made in the same way? And what might we take from that?
Yeah, I don't know about a precedent, like pursuant to a legal precedent on, this, like similar to like a case law setting on this. I don't think so. I think that would have been considered in discussions and definitely from legal advice. I don't think that was something that we thought is an outcome of this. Definitely on the timing of it. I wasn't happy with the timing of this. Happened before I was even the executive director. This was brought to me at some time. I didn't become the executive director since 2022. And, this happened in 2020. The pandemic had a lot to do with that timing. I believe their shoe boards weren't being held as other boards and commissions weren't being held and those types of things. So yeah, that was it. That was not ideal. And I hope and we continue to work on expediting the cases and making sure that we are working on them as diligently as possible. Timeliness of discipline is always a factor, and I'm always, if it's going to be effective and have that outcome as Mr. Stein extended, of changing officer behavior, and as you pointed out, and making sure that it also deters any sort of this type of behavior in the future. It needs to be timely and it needs to be on, and I, for my decision of finding this as sustained, and instilling discipline and finding that they did file policy, I said I agreed with that, right? That's what I think.
I think the other thing that, will this create precedent? We have, upcoming reviews of the Lodo shooting, which is the same possible break of policy, right? Officers need a firm backdrop to fire. And in the Lodo shooting, they used a glass window of a bar as their firm backdrop, and 6 people got shot who had nothing to do with the person that the police were in pursuit of. And so my concern here is that all of a sudden we say, doesn't much matter what's behind them. They can shoot whatever they want. And if it hits cars or people or whatever, like willy-nilly running around the city with guns. And so, this is not isolated. This is very important in terms of, what may come in a shooting that actually did harm people significantly. And so I want to put that out into the ether. Like, this is really problematic for the residents of Denver who may be walking along a street and have a police officer fire at somebody who committed a crime and happen to get shot by that officer because they are walking home from work. And so, we will continue to focus on this. And the whole point of a discipline matrix is that we understand what the policy is and what discipline is applied when policy is broken. And so in this case, it feels like the system has failed. And I'm concerned about it failing a second time in a case when people out having a nice time were also shot by officers. Rufina, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, can I respond to that real quickly? I would like to say that, in the situation you just described, the Lodo shooting, that officer was criminally charged. And I will say that our training and our tactics, and I know DPD policy always has particularly highlighted backdrop and knowing your backdrop, and policy is very clear on that. So that in that case, there was, and officers this day, and without things like qualified immunity, not only are folks, officers having to think about when they pull out their guns and have to use lethal force, they're thinking they could be charged and go to prison, or they could also be personally sued. So I will say that that is a focus. That is something I don't think that our community should worry that officers are just going to willy-nilly go out and shoot people and shoot at people without no ramifications. I know, at being an officer that carried a gun, what you think about, and you never want to be able to pull out your gun and have to do that. And so I just want to make that point.
Go ahead, Rufina.
Yeah, I do think, I understand what you're saying, that this doesn't have legal, the precedent piece of it, but at the same time, it does send a signal to our men and women on the force that in this instance, it was okay. So it may actually lead to more confusion as opposed to having a policy that's very clear. So that would be another reason to be concerned about, this issue of timing. There would be a way to argue that, given the emergency that we were all under in the pandemic, that things got postponed, and so that shouldn't have relevance anymore. But at the same time, the fact that one was given discipline, one was not given discipline, that's where we sometimes have the issue of giving a clear direction to our people that, it's a very challenging job, and having that decision right there at the minute that you're facing it, if they have a clear direction of what is policy, what is not policy, would be helpful. That's all.
Yeah, and in my response to Julia, I would echo the same thing. The policy is very clear, and my decision is very clear. This was wrong, and it was not acceptable. And I will, if this happens again, I will find it. And if they do if it's not within policy, I'll find it out of policy. So it's very clear. And as I said, I think our officers know that. I think it's definitely in front of mind. I also think it's why it's so difficult to get applicants for this job now, because now with so much scrutiny on any action that they do, we've heard it. We heard it from, it's a problem for retention now also, that people are these are not the minute this is going to happen. These are split-second decisions where they got to get it perfect. And despite the chaos of what's happening in these situations, they not only got to get it perfect, but if they do utilize force, they got to make sure that they hit their target. And so that is something that every officer I know, it's something that they carry with them. And unfortunately, folks make mistakes. It's very unfortunate when people get hurt with those mistakes, but that's I think it is very clear to our department. I know that Chief Thomas, his leadership team in our training academy stresses this. We train it, we continue to train it, and this will be center focus for them. Any other?
Yeah, Armando, I don't minimize any of that in terms of what you're saying. None of it. And in fact, I agree with it. But in this instance, and I know I don't want to belabor this and debate this as compared to other incidents like Lodo, but here, neither of these officers was subject to any kind of criminal maybe a criminal investigation, but criminal prosecution, unlike what's going on in Lodo. We're talking about pretty modest, really modest disciplinary actions taken as a result of putting innocent people in danger of being injured or killed. And I hear you. We were very clear. This was out of policy. And again, I'm reiterating what a few of us are saying is this very modest discipline that we were saying should be imposed. And whether it has precedential value or not, it's the right thing to do, because you're saying, look, you went out of policy, you put innocent people's lives at risk, and therefore there should be some discipline imposed. And that's all we're saying. And we're just disappointing that the upshot of this is that it didn't happen. I think that's the bottom line anyway for me.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Oh, I do want to mention on the criminal investigation process, while the administrative process for this shooting was delayed, when an officer involved shooting happens, I'll explain that just so everyone knows. A criminal investigation is started right away. So folks are called out that night, that time, that day immediately from our Office of Independent Monitor, the district attorney, and then we have an independent team that comes in from the Colorado Bureau of Investigations and State Police. So they come out, and that evaluation and that criminal investigation is done right off the bat. And in this case, that decision was made to not charge.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we can share with the board, I don't know if it was shared, is the shoot decision, that letter that comes out from the district attorney on that. So.
Yeah, no, I got that. I'm just saying that the ultimate discipline that you were trying to get imposed, that for some reason this hearing officer overturned, was very modest, with a modest number suspension. That's all I'm saying. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
You said you didn't want to belabor, but I want to belabor. I feel really mad about it. Let's belabor. Okay. Any other board members have things that they want to say about this? All right, well, we will revisit this when the Lodo shooting comes back and appreciate you hearing our frustration today. What is the point of disciplinary processes if they never apply discipline? So thank you for that. Armando, I cannot remember if that was the last question.
Nope, we have a couple more.
Okay. Okay.
So the next question was, you all had a brief introductory chat with the new Administrative Investigation Unit Director, Elizabeth Brett, during your last meeting. And the question is, have I given her any specific priorities or directions as she takes over the leadership of the AIU? So for everyone's awareness and for community that's on, the AIU is our internal affairs or internal investigations branch for administrative investigations for the Denver Sheriff Department that is within our public integrity division of the Department of Safety. We've had some turnover in the director position, which is an integral position in these investigations, directing the investigations, what cases are investigated, the staffing, the timeliness, all those things. So we were ecstatic that we were able to get an applicant of such quality like Elizabeth. She is, when we first went through the interview process, we had several good applicants with a wide range of experience and investigation expertise, supervision. And what stood out to Elizabeth was her experience in oversight. So she came from Chicago in an oversight model, an oversight practice, and worked in a couple of areas there. She is a practicing attorney in Chicago. And when I interviewed her specifically, what I was impressed with was her appreciation for oversight, that experience, and then knowing, and when I talked to her about some of the things that I would highlight for her, which are case timeliness, case management, investigative resources and the devotion and how we do this in collaboration with our independent monitor and our oversight board. She really, I thought, focused on those and had great responses and really aligned with our priorities. And so again, to answer the question, so my priorities to her were first, she needs to learn our system, right? She's coming out from the inside, so we knew that she would learn our system. We were also very intentional about helping her get onboarded, having a very robust and onboarding cycle where I've had several meetings with her, our staff, our executive team, our human resources staff. She's worked and we've had meetings with the independent monitor and the Office of an Independent Monitor, meetings with her staff and her people and her team, which I've been part of as well. And then really getting a handle on the data and having our data analysts work closely with her on getting a good picture of the data of what's happening. What are the caseloads? What are the case timelines? What are the older cases? How do we get these back on track? And that's really where her priorities have been, and that's what they're focusing on. We're having very good results so far. She's working really well in learning that, and I think in the collaboration with all our partners, like the monitor, our departments, the sheriff's department, and all those folks. So that was really where we highlighted that. I also wanted to give her and empower her to use her outside, she's looking out from the outside. These are fresh eyes on this, right? So I wanted her to be empowered to see if she sees things that could be efficiencies, sees things that we could better, or things that maybe she did in her former worlds that she could bring here that might help us in our practice. We were open to all that. So it's been really good. Really have enjoyed working with her, but she's here and making this her home. Feedback on that. If not, I can jump to the last question, which has a few questions kind of in it. So there's an Office of Neighborhood Safety that has been created in the City and County of Denver here under our Office of Social Equity Innovation. It was started by really discussions. Well, first I got to give credit to where the idea and concept came through, and that is from the Reimagining Policing and Public Safety Task Force that was born from the leadership of Dr. Robert Davis, former Pastor Robert Davis, from Dr. Lisa Calderon, from other community leaders that came together after the murder of George Floyd, and came together with over 100 recommendations for the city to recommends to increase and reimagine public safety and policing in our city. One of those was an idea of creating an Office of Neighborhood Safety. This is something from the get-go I've always supported. I've always voiced my support for it. This came upon during the latter part of the Hancock administration. Mayor Hancock funded a study that was done by CU Denver about an Office of Neighborhood Safety and an Office of Community Engagement, and really talked about, would that work here? Looking at other jurisdictions across the country that have done that, there's more than a handful that have done it. What does it look like? Where should it be housed? All those questions were asked of the study. There have been some public hearings in City Council, particularly in Safety Committee, by the task force. I've gone to those, voiced my support. Again, like I've said, I've always supported. One other thing that was very clear from the recommendation from community was that it not be housed in a Department of Safety. That was something that was important, that they didn't want, and they thought for it to succeed, it needed to be outside of the department. I was asked when Mayor Johnston came on board, he was, obviously this was on his radar and talking about it during his first year in office. It came up during the budget process. Still very new. We were working in a restricted budget like we are again today, but he talked about implementing it in his term, and so we worked on it, and it was something I was working on. I was working on it, talking with other leaders here in the city, talking with Dr. Calderon and Dr. Davis. We've had meetings with them. And me and Dr. Ben Davis from the executive director and our OSEI and our chief equity officer in the city began having discussions about what would it look like in his department. And so as those discussions, we started, they were very informal, started talking back and forth. We started working with our chief operating officer, Janelle Ford. And then we started looking at logistics. And what I recognized very early on was that an Office of Neighborhood Safety would need significant investment by the Department of Safety to get started. And so I willingly put forth what carved out what monetarily is $11 million in budget that we have assigned over to the Office of Community Violence Solutions, which is formerly GRID, which is a lot of our gang reduction work and violence prevention work. And that's headed by Dr. Nicole Monroe. And then our Office of Public Safety Youth Programs, the diversionary work we do with our youth, the pretrial detention work that's done with our youth, a lot of work with our vulnerable youth is done from them. And so I thought that they really embodied a lot of work that could be done and really flourish within an Office of Neighborhood Safety. There are two other functions and budgetary items in my budget that I agreed and then talked with Ben about moving over to his office to create an Office of Neighborhood Safety. And that was the AIDS Center. And I've talked to you all about the AIDS Center. I thought really we built it with a community focus and lens, and we wanted it to really thought it would flourish there, being that community hub, that navigation source hub for people and things. So we moved over the budget for that, all the FTE, all the things. And then the last piece that was still in safety that I thought would work really well over in the Office of Neighborhood Safety was the last remaining position we had involved in the STAR program, in the STAR response program. And that is the position we have at our dispatch center. As you all remember, STAR program started here in safety as a pilot in the summer of 2020. And then it was moved to the Department of Public Health and Environment. It is something we contract, the work is contracted out to WellPower for the clinician that's on board with STAR and with Denver Health for the paramedic that's on board. But we had a position that has historically been a clinician that is working in the 911 center that really helps with that 911 response, the type of calls that are diverted to STAR and really works as that coordinator of that work. And that position I thought would work really well going over to the Office of Neighborhood Safety, being integrated in that community work. So the sub question on that, so we interact. So my first interaction was I really helped start it up by handing those folks off. Well, we did it mid-year this year. So on the budget, in our formal budget, which we do year to year, and it's on a calendar year, that transfer of actually the line item transfers of stuff, well, right now it is gone, that transfer of people, resources, and things are, I mentioned, and this was a significant part of that transfer too. I also realized to have all these resources go over, Dr. Sanders needed some executive support, right, to help them, a deputy. So we had one of our executive directors who was happy to join the effort and move over with them. And so our executive director that served as our chief administration officer moved over with his programs to Dr. Sanders' group. So all that moved over. It's moved over via Workday, our system of reporting things. It's formally going to move over officially, like in line item budgets, in the formal transfer process of the 2025 budget. But the expending authority and all those authorities now are with Dr. Sanders, not with me. So he is in control of all that now. We are working together in a lot of spaces still, and we're still supporting things. So in some cases, he needs financial support or financial staff support to support the grants that they operate under, and administrative support, and in our efforts around safety. So we are in community meetings. Dr. Sanders is out there in community. We show up. When I say we, it's me, Chief Thomas, typically the district leadership that is in that district that we're at. And we show up to support and talk with it, because public safety just isn't policing or the public safety department. It's all the things, and community is a big part of that. So we're still going to work hand in hand with them. So all the grants, all the money, and all the things have been assigned over there. They will be officially line itemed and all that in the 2025 budget. But for all intents, they are over there and under their supervision and under their control. The ongoing cooperation is another question we had, as I'd like to explain. We're in meetings. We're probably in multiple meetings. We're with not only ONS, but our public health and environment and all our city teams, to how we can all work together and bring our resources to bear to help reduce violence, reduce crime, all those things that we want to do to make sure that our community is safe. And and the last question that was a subset to that is, do I anticipate any significant developments or changes to the institutional relationship before the end of the year? And really, the only change, and I think this is really an improvement, I think it's just going to be more formalized in building them as a part of the public safety response. Just like when STAR started off as a pilot, it was really like it was a pilot, at the nighttime in District 6, and then we built off success, and then they become just integrated in the response, right? Everyone, when we think of public response, a call for a mental health crisis, we don't think police, we think STAR. So I think as time, we're going to be seeing ONS really develop their identity. I know that Dr. Sanders and his team are working closely with a lot of community stakeholders to see what community wants for them to do. And we're really here just to support that effort. And where they need our help, we'll join in. Where they got and they have a hand, that's what we're going to do. But I'm really looking forward to them just being more integrated in that overall response and being part of the public safety system.
Great, thanks. Questions on that from the board? And that was our last question to Armando. So questions on other things too. Karen, I see your hands up.
Yes, Dr. Director, who are the community members, specifically from the initial idea of putting this group together, who are now meeting with the administration that you put in charge of this effort?
So the committee informing the Office of Neighborhood Safety?
Well, if that's what they're doing, who are they?
Where they, so he's, I know Dr. Sanders, he's probably best to answer that. He's meeting with a lot of community stakeholders
Can
and,
you name any of them? Can you name any of those community members that he's meeting with?
I know I'll miss out some of them, but I know he's met with, well, first Dr. Davis, Dr. Calderon, I know they've met. I know that he's met with the Ministerial Alliance. I know he's met with folks from the Colorado Black Roundtable. I know he's met with, folks from the Public Safety Transition Committee. I know he's met, including Nita Gonzalez, who was one of the chairs of that committee. I know that he's met with, people from there was an Office of Neighborhood Safety Transition Committee. I believe he's met with them as well and continues to meet with others in the community.
That was gonna be my next question. I hear you saying that there was a meeting. Is there an ongoing effort to include the community members that you have just named from those groups in ongoing discussions of how this transfer is happening?
Yep. So I know that that Dr. Davis is continuing to collaborate with all of them. I don't have the total list because I'm not the one doing it, it's him. But I know he's working with a lot of community stakeholders, and as I mentioned, he's also gone out to the community. We've been out to, the most recent one was in East Colfax. We're out and he was giving that. Before that, we're in Montbello in the same week having a community meeting. So we continue to go out and about, and I don't think it's limited. And as the chairwoman Richmond mentioned earlier on, they also are going to be appointing a community advisory group, an ongoing group that advises them. And that is an open application process now. And in these meetings, he is asking that. And I believe that group, and I don't know the exact makeup of how many people, but I believe that a group is going to be appointed by a combination of city council and the mayor's office.
So do you understand that there's some lack of trust and belief in the idea that there be this particular group standing away from the powers that be in the administration to maintain a basic kind of self-reliance in terms of their operation, and not being so influenced and being run by the safety administration?
Well, it's not being run by me at all. As I said, I've transferred over these positions to be run by Dr. Davis in Office of Social Equity and Innovation. So we're not running this at all.
You said Dr. Davis?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Dr. Sanders. I'm sorry, Dr. Sanders. Ben Sanders from the executive director of OSCI.
And so those are all people who are a part of the safety administration, correct?
No. No, Dr. Sanders is my peer. He's a executive director of the Office of Social Equity and Innovation, which is a office under the mayor's office. He is not under my direction at whatsoever. He's also the chief equity officer for the city. He is an appointee of the mayor, not me. Any other questions?
Other questions?
I do have an unrelated question, Director Saldate.
Sure.
I'm wondering if you could speak to the number of arrest records, specifically under the birth section, that are being logged in as XX or unknown. And what's leading to that practice? Do we simply not know who's out here?
Yep.
Is this practice increasing?
Yeah.
Help clarify that for me, please.
Yes, sir. So are you, if you're referring to Denver Sheriff Department records, when someone is booked into our jail, birthplace is not asked. So we do not ask or collect any information about anyone's status, legal status, immigration status whatsoever. So their birthplace is not collected. In fact, that information that is input into the system is actually come from the arresting agency. So the arresting agency puts that in, and then when they book them into our jail, that's, populated into the jail system. But that's not something that we ask for. In fact, there's city ordinance prohibiting that.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, too?
So the
Uh,
idea is that they're not collecting it so that it could never be
Utilize.
subpoenaed or collected by another agency.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And in those instances where the birth section is captured, it's because they willingly contributed that information.
It could be, yeah, that they willingly contributed it, or that it was before we had a law in place and that it's just in our records, and their records, people that come through the criminal justice system, let's say they're arrested, 10 years ago, before all this kind of took place. And in our system, their record still resides with that, but that is not anything that we rely upon nor collect actively right
Gotcha. Thank you, Director Saldate.
now. No problem.
Any other questions from the board for Director Saldate?
And Emily, if we can note, we can get that ordinance to you and the policy on that, Mr. Reyes, so you have it. Correct.
Yep, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Monitor Castle. I know you were having some connection issues earlier. Wonder if you have any matters to discuss in the public realm. Well, before we do that, Director Saldate, thank you for your time today, and I'll release you from the hounds here, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
All right, thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, go ahead.
Just quickly, the Office of the Independent Monitor will be moving the office location either at the beginning of December or the beginning of January. We will be moving to the Wellington Webb building. We had an opportunity to kind of do a little bit of a hard hat walk through the space yesterday. Seems to be coming along on track. So we have that to look forward to in the future. That's it for open session. We do have matters for executive session. Can't hear you, Julia.
I see Daniel's hand. Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, just before we go to executive session, I had two brief matters of board
Great, go ahead.
business. The first one was related to our upcoming strategic planning effort on November 16th. That's a Saturday. We do currently have a board meeting scheduled for that Friday, the 15th. And I wanted to bring it up to the board as to whether or not we want to cancel that meeting and attempt to reschedule our guest. I believe it's Sheriff Diggins. If the board would like to do that, I can work on rescheduling Sheriff Diggins to a later meeting.
Thoughts from the board?
Yes.
All right. Hearing no disagreement on that, or any other opinions? I see Rafina off mute. I see maybe Larry's trying to say something.
I'm okay either way. Keeping a reschedule.
I'm also happy to reschedule.
All right, we will give folks some time back perhaps on Friday because we'll see you on Saturday, and look forward to the discussion for strategic planning. Thanks.
Great.
What else, Daniel?
Following on that same subject, we had mentioned the proposals are due today, this evening. Are there any board members who would like to volunteer to review those proposals initially and make a recommendation to the board as to which facilitator to select? Okay,
Great.
Julia, Rufina,
Oh.
and I miss Larry.
Larry, great, thanks.
Great. I think three should be plenty. Julia.
Great. And we're not asking people for like, you know, a dissertation level proposal. It should be a very quick, quick submission. So hopefully that will not be a huge burden. Somebody who, yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Stefan raised his hand on that.
Oh, great. More the merrier.
So I saw the last bit of back and forth on the letter that was going back on the city settlements.
Oh, yes.
And so I assume we're final now with that edit that you suggested be made, Daniel, so that we could send that letter out.
Yes, I guess the only question is, do we want that dated today or for Monday?
Oh, I don't care.
I am in meetings until 5 o'clock today, so I assume I will not get it out until then. Maybe let's do it on Monday.
Sure.
Works for me.
Great.
Thank you very much, by the way. Thank you. Yeah.
And appreciate all the edits and commentary from folks. I really think that is helpful. So, so great. So we'll send that out, and still more work to do on that matter, but I think we've gotten to a good place where we sort of know what the work is, which was the first question we needed to really understand the answer to. So, okay, with that, based on the fact, and I just always want to read my language off our sheet here so I get it right. Based on the fact that we have ongoing investigations or matters of deliberative privilege, I would ask a board member to make a motion to adjourn to executive session. Or not.
So moved.
Thank you. We don't have to go.
Second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. See you there. Thanks everyone for a productive meeting today.